we have the LS out, so now it's time to put it in something else. And I know this is probably going to piss off a few Pontiac guys, but this seems like a good candidate for swapping the LS into. What's really going to make some people mad is it's 100% original, and it's one of 555 Trans Am convertibles made in 1991. So, sorry, not sorry. But I think this is what we're going to put the LS in, mainly because everything else has an LS in it, as it should. So, first thing we got to do, get this in the shop, pull the old stock engine out, which sadly runs fine. The AC even works after all these years, but it's got to be pulled out. Starting to pull the stock powertrain out of this one. The one mod somebody did to this one is put a Borg-Warner 9-bolt into this with disc brakes as opposed to the 10-bolt. And this would have 327 gears versus the factory 277s and 4 spiders instead of 2. So this actually, in my experience, is a really good, cheap rear end, although they're getting more expensive because people are realizing they hold a lot more power than 10 bolts. And they also bolt right into anything from 82 to 2002. You would have to run possibly spacers on a 4th gen, depending on which wheels you used. And we pulled the drive shaft. Being a WS6, it does have an aluminum drive shaft instead of steel. We may replace that with a 4th gen drive shaft, may not. They're the same exact length. They're interchangeable. The 4th gen drive shaft's just a slightly bigger diameter, although factory LS not going to make the power to probably break either one. We pulled the 700 R4 out, so that disappointment's gone. As you can see, the old ones were controlled by a throttle valve cable, whereas the new ones are fully electronic. So now all we got to do is pull this 305 TPI out, which means pulling all the electronics off the top side and pulling it out next. And then all the slow pieces will be out. The engine's pulled out, so there's no turning back now. We're going to reuse these motor mount plates on this side. And the way we're going to do that is we got these adapters on the LS motor. We're going to unbolt the small block Chevy side, bolt them up to the LS, and then hopefully, if we're lucky, they line up just right. So, no turning back now. So we did the easy part, and that is put in the 5.3 in the vehicle. Use the typical adapter plates that you can get off eBay for like $35, and they make it so the factory motor mounts essentially work. This is where we start getting into, I wish we had a 4th gen. 4th gen headers fit a 3rd gen and clear. Truck headers are way too wide to do not. Luckily, we got on China Bay here. These were about $200. They actually seem to fit pretty decent considering the Stainless Works version I bought was $1,200 last time I did this. Stainless Works, by the way, great. Headers, decade later, still look shiny. These probably will look rusty after I run the car for a little bit. But we're on a budget here, so now that it's in there, though, we can start to see that this whole entire intake is not going to clear the hood. That is, again, where I wish I had a 4th gen, because if you priced LS intakes, fuel rails, and all that stuff, where I used to sell them for $50, $100, now people want like $500 for them, which is, in my opinion, absolutely insane. But we are not going to be able to put a hood on here without doing something. We can probably drive around without a hood for a while, but at some point we will have to fix that. This lovely rat nest of wires. So what I do is all the main wires from the factory harness back when I had tune port, go back to here. I take those, throw them up on the windshield so they're out of the way. All the wires you see here, this rat's nest, is all from the LS engine. So we'll have to go through that, figure out what we want to keep, what we want to get rid of. Tie the gauges into this harness. Use the HEI off this harness. Use the ignition off this harness. We still have some relays for the factory tune port fans, which do bolt up there, so we might use the factory tune port fans as opposed to using the extra little harness that we have somewhere in this rat's nest that ran the other fans off the truck. Again, this is just an AC delete box. I have tried to fit AC behind these things before. I know you can do it. I know you can notch the K member and run AC on them. I've notched the K member before. It's a tight fit. It's a convertible. If I'm running the AC, I took the wrong car. So, again, China Bay, heater box, AC delete box, whatever you want to call it. The holes didn't line up. I mean, I had to drill them out bigger. Luckily, when I tighten the bolts down, you won't really see that. I'll have to drill holes for the fan motor, stuff like that. But transmission's bolted up underneath. Drive shaft's hooked up to the transmission. We're going to have to do something about the fuel system. If we had a 4th gen, I would take the 4th gen fuel tank, the 4th gen fuel pump, everything, bolts right into a 3rd gen. Would have saved me a ton of money. The options now are, I do have a 4th gen tank from before I could use, but not all the parts. I have the factory 3rd gen tank, which I would have to put a different high pressure pump on. If you're familiar with the factory 3rd gen tanks though, you have to drop the whole axle to get them out because the filler hose is not flexible like the 4th gen filler hose, so they're a pain to get out. So if you take them out once, do I really want to put it back in knowing if I ever have to take it out again, it's a pain. I have to drop the axle, whereas the 4th gen tank, I can take that out with a single jack stand in my driveway on the ground in 15 minutes. Just on both the 2 straps, jack the car up just high enough the tank slides out because it's got a flexible filler neck. Then when we get up here, the question is, are we going to run a regulator up here? Or if we had the 4th gen fuel pump, it would have the regulator built in. Or we could buy the early Corvette fuel filter, which they actually put on some other vehicles besides just Corvette, that actually is going to regulate the pressure up. So these are all expenses we would not have if we just had a complete donor 4th gen. Good news is we did sell the axle out of the Suburban. I'm keeping track of it. We sold that axle for $450, so that helps offset a little bit of this. So we'll see where we're at when I'm all done with this. So right now it looks like we made a lot of progress. Stuff coming up is not going to look like we made a lot of progress. There's a lot of slow going from here on out. Routing transmission lines somehow through all this mess up here. Going through the rat's nest of wiring, going through the fuel system. It's all going to take a lot longer, but right now it looks like we're making progress. So let's get back to work. And if you are enjoying this series, do me a favor, like and subscribe. So a lot of work is taking place off camera. One of the things you have to do, obviously, is get fuel to it. If it's a fuel-injected car, you're still going to have to put a new fuel pump in it, because the LSs run at a higher fuel pressure than the 80s, 90s cars did. In this case, went ahead and put a whole entire 4th gen plastic fuel tank in, 4th gen fuel bucket and everything, just because on 3rd gens, they happen to fit. Everything from 82 to 2002 is pretty much a bolt-in. Even these rear axles, 82, 92, 2002, they bolt in. Torque arms bolt in. Drive shafts are the same, just different diameters. So bolted that all in. Even the 4th gen fuel lines. If you take your 3rd gen fuel filter, turn it 90 degrees and re-tack weld it like that. It works with the 4th gen fuel lines. All you have to do up here, cut and use one little connector to put it back together. So everything under here has kind of been put together. If you don't have a fuel tank, you're still gonna have to either run wires if you have a 70s car, or replace the factory fuel pump with a higher pressure one for an LS out of like a 98 Camaro works. Then you're gonna have to put a regulator. Either you can use a fuel pump regulator, which is what you saw a second ago when I was under the car, or you can put an actual regulator by the engine, use the stock fuel lines. On this car, it's easier to use the 4th gen fuel lines. On most vehicles, it's probably easier to use the stock lines. So let me show you on top what we got done. No more truck intake. Happened to, let's just say, get a deal on an LS6 intake. So, okay, it was over at my house really, but if you had to buy this, these things are stupid expensive anymore. And I used to sell an LS1 intake for 50 bucks, and now even LS1 intakes are $300-400, which is just insane. So here's where you start to break the bank using a truck 5.3 and not an LS1. If you need hood clearance like I do, have to use LS1, LS6, LS2 intake, depending on. This worked good because we still have the drive-by-wire for now. It was the same 3 bolts. Don't have any coolant or anything hooked up, but as you can see, we've made a lot of progress. Still have a wiring mess, although on the back we've depinned some of it here. Let me go over this real quick for people. Yellow wire, starter. This red wire here powers the whole fuse block. This wire here is just a power wire. It used to go to the instrument cluster. Now it's probably going to power our OBD2 port. At some point, we're going to hook up a fuel pump. And we'll probably use, I believe it's this wire right here. All these wires stay the same, except we jumped one of them for the transmission so it would have power to the solenoids. So, that pretty much lets the engine start. Okay, I have not tried to start this thing. Last time it ran, it was in the Suburban. I could not have started this thing because I just finally got these adapters. They go from EV6 to EV1 for the injectors. Needed those. Just plugged those in, hooked up to MAF temporarily. Had to jump the fuel pump right here. I'm just going to hold it to the battery. I'm going to hold this other wire. It's going to activate the fuse box, and then we got a starter wire. So honestly, we're both doing this at the same time. I have no idea if it's going to work, it's going to blow up, what's going to happen. Holding this and filming, though, that might be an issue. Hey, I can't hold the wires together. But that was a good sign. Let me see if I can get the wires tighter. Alright, I noticed I had 2 spark plug wires disconnected, so I thought I'd go ahead and hook those up. It might run a little better. Saw a guy that had a vice grip in his garage, and his stuff always started, so I decided to hook a vice grip up there. So really all we should have to do is hold that wire there, crank her. There we go. Literally 2 wires. And she starts up. You have got to love that. All right, now we know we have an engine that starts again. Let's continue on with all the little tedious stuff that makes it actually function drivable. This is going to be the final entry of this series. The last major thing we did was I got an exhaust put on. So really at this point, it's a running, driving car. There's cleanup I need to do, but I don't think anybody wants to see that on camera. But you can at least hear myself talk over the exhaust now. I need to clean up the wiring, but it's actually an on-cut harness. It just doesn't have any loom around it, so it looks worse than it really is. So the last thing is we're just going to take it for a ride. Just to prove. This is a running, driving, LS swapped, 91 Trans Am convertible, of which they only made 555 of in 91. So the question now is, what did this cost us? I've kept track all along in the spreadsheet, and we're going to go over here in a minute of what this cost versus what I made selling old parts. And I will say one thing, this is the first 5.3 swap I did from a truck. Every other swap I've done is a 5.7 out of a 4th gen Camaro or Trans Am. That is definitely the way to go. You spend so much more money trying to convert a 5.3 into something that clears the hood of this car, because you don't have an LS1 or LS6 intake, the oil pan, the accessories, none of that 5.3 stuff works. So this is probably the most expensive LS swap I've ever done. With that said, I made money on my other LS1 swaps. In most cases I made $2-3 grand sometimes. This one, I don't expect to make any money, but hopefully I didn't lose too much money. So. Let's look at that spreadsheet. Okay, I know in the videos I skipped showing putting on the accessories and putting the radiator and fans and stuff, but I did keep track of the costs, so let's go through everything right now. So, I found a 5.3 Suburban, 2-wheel drive transmission online. Tree fell on it, paid $700. HP tuners to turn off the vats, turn off some codes, $100. Had to get an F-body oil pan because the 5.3 pan won't work. That was $70. Had to get motor mount adapters. You can just grab those off eBay, $29. Valve cover gaskets, because they all leak and you might as well change them, $11. eBay headers. These fit surprisingly well. I did not have to put a single hammer dent in them, $190. Y-pipe. This was more expensive than the headers. I actually had a Y-pipe made. It was $250 in parts, and guy knew he was going to weld it up for another $250, which by the time I spent doing it with the welder, just wasn't even worth me doing. So that was $500, but tied in the headers to the factory 3rd gen exhaust and muffler, so had a full exhaust when I was done. HVAC delete box, $20. They're on eBay. They don't fit great, but it's a convertible. I'm not going to use the AC because if I'm driving it, the top's going to be down anyway. Fuel filter, $13. Fuel filter neck. I had one of these. I couldn't find it, so I went ahead and spent $102, and then I found the one I had. Fuel tank. I actually had a plastic 4th gen fuel tank. LS1 fuel pump. These are dirt cheap on eBay anymore, from China, $32. 4th gen fuel line. These are like the plastic lines that connect to the metal lines. Fuel pump lock ring, another thing I didn't have, $18 on eBay. I bought some braided transmission lines because the truck lines don't work. If you had a 4th gen Camaro, you wouldn't have had to buy these either, $34. Trans cooler because you don't want to hook this thing up to the stock radiator cooler. That's just garbage, $41. For that AC delete box, you have to get a different blower wheel for $30. Hawk's transmission mount. These things do not fit. Hawks will say they do, but they have to be heavily modified, cut up, re-welded to fit. And you're paying $150 for the privilege of doing that. Dirty Dingo accessory mounts. This allows you to put the power steering and a 4th gen alternator in the factory 4th gen locations. That was $145. I tried different ways to mount the alternator for cheaper. Whoop. But I did not find one. Need a stock F body belt because the truck one's longer and you change the accessories, it doesn't work anymore. Radiator hose from Hawks. Another thing that does not work. The hose where it connects to the lower radiator spout is too small. I mean, you really have to put a heat gun on it, and it just takes everything to fit it over the factory radiator. Why they didn't flare it, their answer is, well, we don't know what radiator you're going with, and we assume it's aftermarket. Why would you build a hose for an aftermarket radiator and not a stock radiator when more people are probably going to have the stock ones? I do not know. They don't tell you this on the website, so I feel like it was just an excuse. So kind of 0 for 2 for Hawk stuff working. I made it work, but not great. LS6 intake and fuel rails. Here's where you're all going to spend money, and I happen to have another engine that had this on there, let's say. So I swapped it over. These things used to be, at least in LS1, I would sell these for like $50 with a throttle body, and I'd keep the injector rail. Now they're like $300-400. It's ridiculous. If you have to buy an LS1 intake or LS6 intake and fuel rails, you're going to spend $500 or $600. This is why, right away, another reason, go with a 4th gen F body that already has an LS1 intake, has the right accessories, has the right oil pan. You can see how much money we would have saved by doing that. 4th gen power steering pump, because I relocated the accessories and the truck one doesn't work. The hose that goes with it. Tensioner pulley. So what did that all add up to so far? $2,470. I reused the factory 3rd gen radiator. The factory 3rd gen fans were electric, and luckily they spliced right into my Suburban because it had electric fans on it. If you had a mechanical fan truck, you would have to come up with a way to either wire the electric fans or do something, and it wouldn't have worked. So that's where we're at, $2,470 for a $500 LS swap. Now, the only good thing about this is I had an entire vehicle to part out. If you can part out a vehicle, you can make money. So you people that buy these $500 5.3s off Marketplace that don't come in a vehicle, this is how much money you're leaving on the table. You're still going to have to spend your $2,470, but you don't have anything to sell to offset that. So at least buy one that's already in a vehicle. That way you can see if it's running. If you can find one that's in a vehicle, you can part out the vehicle. You can see if it's running, hopefully, before you buy it. So let's go over what I sold. Front bumper off a Suburban, $75. Rear bumper off a Suburban, $75. Rear tow hitch, $95. Driver's seat, $30. Passenger seat, $30. Spare tire winch, $10. 2 airbag sensors. These things are actually decent money on eBay. Muffler and exhaust, $40. 4 wheels and tires off the Suburban, another $200. Center console and glove box, $30. AC compressor and some lines, because AC did actually work, $50. I sold the complete 305 tune port and the 704 transmission to somebody that was just thrilled to keep their Pontiac powered, and I did not have the heart to tell him that's just a Chevy 305. But the guy was thrilled to keep his car stock and spent $800 doing it, so that was $800. 342 axle hours Suburban, $450. Why are these so expensive? The Suburban has a 4-link axle and not the leaf spring axle that the trucks have. The truck's leaf spring axle tends to break a lot more than you would think, so people actually pay good money for these axles. Tune port ECU out of the 3rd gen I sold on eBay because it was fine, $175. Exhaust manifolds, I don't know, somebody probably flipped these around and welded some turbos to them. Who knows, $40. And then I scrapped the vehicle. I didn't even take it to the scrapyard. Somebody came and picked it up and gave me $150, so that was convenient. Sold the drive shaft for another $50. Some guy wanted some fuel tank and lines. He paid $20. So, right there, $2,385. I wish I'd keep moving my mouse so my monitor stopped going out. $2,385 is what I spent. $2,470. I'm sorry. $2,385 is what I made by selling stuff. $2,470 is what I spent putting this LS1 in this 3rd gen. If you don't want to count my time and labor, which I'm not counting my time and labor, I did this LS swap for less than $100. So when someone says you can't do an LS swap for $500, you can do an LS swap for $500. If you buy a 4th gen and it needs to fit in a car like mine, you're saving $70, $500 for the intake, so they're like $570, fuel pump, $600, fuel line, $650, lock ring, $700. You're saving $700-800 if you start with a 4th gen easily. And 4th gen parts probably easier to sell than Suburban parts because people are looking for Trans Am Firebird parts probably more than they're looking for Suburban parts. So this was my experience. This is what it cost me. It's going to vary a lot by person, by what vehicle you start with, by what you scrounge up, by what you can find on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Buddy that has. So this is just what it cost me. At the end of the day, this is 4th LS swap I've done. I'm in it for less than $100 and a lot of time. So hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it threw a few things on it, showed you where to wire some things up. And check out some of my other videos. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.